3 knocks. Always 3. Tap, tap, tap. That's how it started. That's how I knew something was fundamentally wrong with the house on Berkeley Street. The house I've been so proud to buy. The first home I'd ever owned. Now the place I'm terrified to sleep in. My name is Marcus Webb, and I'm a sound engineer. I work with audio for a living, movies, podcasts, commercials. I can identify the difference between footsteps on hardwood versus laminate. I can tell you if a door creak is from rusty hinges or warped wood just by listening. Sound is my life. So, when I tell you that the knocking coming from inside my walls isn't normal, isn't explainable, isn't anything I've ever encountered in 15 years of professional audio work, you need to believe me, because whatever is making that sound, it's not alone in there anymore. And I think it knows I'm listening. Chapter 1. The purchase. I bought the house in late September, right as the leaves were turning that particular shade of rust that makes New England look like a postcard. It was a steal, a 3-bedroom Victorian in a decent neighborhood for half the market price. My real estate agent, Karen, had that overly cheerful energy that people get when they're trying to distract you from something. It's been on the market for 18 months, she said, her heels clicking on the hardwood as she led me through the first floor. The previous owner was elderly, passed away in a nursing home. Estate sale. The family just wants it gone. I should have asked more questions. Why 18 months? Why so cheap? Why did Karen avoid making eye contact when I asked about the house's history? But I was desperate. 34 years old, finally making decent money, and tired of throwing rent away on apartments where I could hear my neighbors' entire lives through paper-thin walls. I wanted space, privacy, a place that was mine. The house was beautiful in that gothic, slightly unsettling way that old Victorians are. High ceilings with ornate crown molding, original hardwood floors that creaked with character, a wraparound porch that overlooked a yard full of ancient oak trees. The kind of place that looked haunted, but in an aesthetic way, like it belonged on the cover of a design magazine. I'll take it, I said, even though Karen looked almost disappointed when I did. I moved in 3 weeks later on a gray Saturday in October. My best friend Derek helped me with the heavy furniture, complaining the entire time about the narrow staircase and the lack of an elevator. Man, you sure about this place? He asked, setting down a box labeled audio equipment in what would become my home studio. It's got a weird vibe. It's got character. I corrected. Character is what people say when they mean probably haunted. We both laughed. It was funny then, that night, alone in my new house for the first time, I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. It was 2:47 a.m. when I woke up to the sound. I know the exact time because I checked my phone immediately. That instinctive response when you hear something that doesn't belong in the night. The knocking was rhythmic, deliberate, and coming from somewhere inside the walls of my bedroom. Tap, tap, tap. I sat up in bed, my heart rate already elevated. As a sound engineer, my first instinct was to identify the source. I stayed perfectly still, listening. The knocking came again. 3 taps, evenly spaced. It was coming from the wall behind my headboard, the wall I shared with the hallway pipes. I told myself, old houses have old plumbing, water hammer, thermal expansion. There were a dozen rational explanations, but the sound was wrong. Too hollow to be pipes, too precise to be random settling. And there was something else, a quality to it that made my professional ear twitch. The sound had reverb, like it was echoing through a space larger than the narrow gap between walls. I got out of bed and pressed my ear against the wall. The wallpaper was old, textured, slightly damp to the touch. I could feel the cold radiating through it. I waited. 1 minute, 2, nothing. Just as I was about to convince myself I'd imagined it, the knocking returned. But this time, it wasn't. A different location, the wall adjacent to my bed, the one facing the closet. Tap, tap, tap. I pulled back, my skin prickling. Sound doesn't just move like that. Not naturally. I spent the rest of that night sitting up in bed, my bedside lamp on, listening to my house breathe and settle around me. The knocking didn't return. In the morning, with sunlight streaming through the windows and coffee in my system, the fear seemed absurd. Of course, it was just old house sounds. I was being paranoid. I had work to do anyway. I was in the middle of mixing audio for a true crime podcast, and the deadline was tight. I set up my equipment in the spare bedroom I designated as my studio, put on my headphones, and lost myself in work. The knocking became a nightly occurrence, always at 2:47 a.m., always 3 knocks. but the location varied, sometimes in the bedroom walls, sometimes in the hallway, once from inside the bathroom while I was brushing my teeth. That time, I actually dropped my toothbrush in the sink, foam dripping from my mouth as I stared at the wall beside the mirror. Tap, tap, tap. The sound seemed to follow me through the house, like it was tracking my movements, learning my routines. I started keeping a detailed log, noting the time, location, and intensity of each occurrence. My sound engineer's brain couldn't let it go. I needed data, patterns, something to make sense of what was happening. Night 3. Bedroom wall, standard. Intensity to 47 a.m. exactly. Night 4. Hallway wall near the stairs, slightly louder, to 47 a.m. Night 5. Bathroom wall, softer but more persistent, 5 knocks instead of 3 to 47 a.m. I tried everything. I called a plumber who inspected all the pipes and found nothing wrong. He spent 2 hours checking every connection, every valve, looking for water hammer or pressure issues. Your plumbing is actually in great shape for a house this old, he said, wiping his hands on his work pants. Better than most new construction, honestly. I had an HVAC technician check the ductwork. He crawled through my attic and basement, inspecting every inch of metalwork. No expansion issues, no loose connections. Your system is solid. I even hired a general contractor to look for structural issues, settling anything that might cause the sound. He was a burly guy named Tom who'd been working on old houses for 30 years. He tapped walls, checked the foundation, examined the roof trusses. After 3 hours, he stood in my living room shaking his head. House is solid, he said, pocketing my check. Built in 1887, they don't make them like this anymore. Whatever sounds you're hearing, it's not the structure. This place will outlive all of us. The phrase made me uncomfortable, though I couldn't say why. I started recording the knocking. Every night, I set up my professional equipment, the same gear I used for work. Multiple Neumann microphones, positioned strategically throughout the house. A sound devices recorder with pristine preamps, cables that cost more than most people's rent. If there was a sound, I was going to capture it, analyze it, understand it. The first recording was on a Tuesday night. I set up 3 mics, 1 in my bedroom positioned near the wall where the knocking usually occurred, 1 in the hallway just on the other side of that wall, and 1 in my studio as a control. I went to bed with my laptop open, recording software running. Waveform displays glowing green in the dark like some kind of technological seance. At 47 a.m. I woke to the knocking. Tap, tap, tap. This time, it was inside the wall directly above my bed. I didn't move, barely breathed, just stared at the ceiling, watching the shadows from the streetlight outside dance across the plaster. The sound was so clear, so distinct. I could hear the woody resonance of it, the slight echo that suggested a hollow space behind the wall. In the morning, I rushed to check the recordings, my hands actually shaking as I opened the audio files. My coffee sat forgotten on the desk, growing cold while I analyzed the waveforms. The bedroom mic had captured it, clear as day. 3 distinct knocks, exactly 1.3 seconds apart. The waveform showed sharp transient peaks, impact sounds, definitely physical. The frequency analysis showed a fundamental around 180 Hz with harmonics extending up to about 2 kHz. It was real, measurable, scientific. But here's what made my blood run cold. The hallway mic, just 10 feet away on the other side of the wall, had captured nothing. Complete silence during those same timestamps. The waveform was flat, undisturbed, no transients, no energy, nothing. That was impossible. Sound doesn't work that way. Sound waves radiate in all directions from their source. If something was physically knocking inside the wall loud enough for me to hear it clearly, in the bedroom loud enough to register distinct peaks on a professional microphone, the hallway mic should have picked it up too. The wall between them wasn't soundproof. I could hear the house settling, the refrigerator running downstairs, even the wind outside through both microphones, but the knocking, only audible from one side. I checked the studio recording. Also nothing. The timing matched perfectly, 2 hours 47 minutes and 13 seconds a.m. on all 3 recordings. But only the bedroom mic had captured anything. The sound was somehow contained to my bedroom. Specifically, it was only audible from where I slept, where I was vulnerable, where I was alone in the dark. That realization made me feel exposed in a way I'd never experienced before. I became obsessed with understanding the knocking. During the day, I'd work on my audio projects, but my mind was always partly focused on the house. On the mystery inside its walls. I started researching the property's history. The county records office had files giants, but it was the newspaper archives that made me stop breathing. Local doctor dies in mysterious circumstances. October 15, 1903. Dr. Edmund Hartley, a respected physician of Berkeley Street, was found dead in his home yesterday evening. The cause of death has not been determined, though authorities note unusual circumstances surrounding the discovery. Dr. Hartley's body was found in a sealed room within the house's walls. A space that neighbors insist did not exist in the home's original construction. Mrs. Catherine Hartley reported hearing knocking sounds in the days leading up to her husband's disappearance. He said the walls were speaking to him. She told authorities. He said they were calling him home. The doctor's young daughter, Lily, age 7, claims her father told her he had to answer the door on the night he vanished. His body was discovered 3 days later when workers, following the source of a terrible smell, broke through the plaster of an upstairs bedroom wall. Authorities are treating the death as suspicious, but have made no arrest. Mrs. Hartley and her daughter have relocated to her sister's residence in Boston. I read the article 3 times, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the microfilm reader's controls. A sealed room within the walls, knocking sounds, the walls were speaking to him. I was living in Dr. Edmund Hartley's house, sleeping in what was probably the same upstairs bedroom where his body had been found, and something inside the walls was knocking. Chapter 5. The invitation. That night, I almost didn't go to bed. I sat in my living room until 2 a.m., every light in the house blazing. My laptop open to the newspaper article, reading it over and over. Part of me wanted to leave, pack a bag and go to Derek's apartment, or a hotel, or anywhere that wasn't here. But another part, the stubborn, rational part that had spent years training to understand sound, needed to know what was happening. At 2:30 a.m., I forced myself upstairs. I set up my recording equipment again, but this time I added something new, a camera. If something was physically knocking, maybe I could see the wall moving, vibrating, something. I lay in bed, watching the red recording light blink on my equipment, and waited. 2:47 a.m. arrived. Tap, tap, tap. The knocking came from the wall to my left, the one facing the hallway. I kept my eyes on the camera screen, watching for any movement. The wall didn't move, didn't vibrate. The plaster remained perfectly still, but the knocking continued, and this time it didn't stop at 3 taps. Tap, 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 tap. 6 knocks. Double the usual pattern. My heart hammered as I watched the wall. In the camera's night vision, everything was shades of green and black. Nothing moved. Then the knocking changed rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. It was a pattern, a code. And with a sick feeling of recognition, I realized what it was: Morse code. I'd learned Morse code years ago for a film project about World War II radio operators. The pattern was simple, unmistakable. HELF wall was asking for help. Chapter 6. The investigation. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat at my desk, my hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, staring at the wall as dawn slowly lightened the windows. Help. Something inside the wall needed help. The rational part of my brain screamed that this was impossible. The wall was just a wall, plaster over wooden lath over empty space with maybe some old insulation. There was nothing inside it. Couldn't be anything inside it. But Dr. Edmund Hartley's body had been found inside a wall in this house, in a sealed room that supposedly didn't exist. At 8 a.m., I called Derek. I need you to come over, I said, my voice rough from lack of sleep. And bring your tools. All of them, Marcus. It's Saturday morning. I was sleeping. Derek, please. I think there's something inside my walls, and I need to open them up. There was a long pause. You're serious? As a heart attack. He arrived an hour later, with his truck full of tools, sledgehammers, pry bars, a reciprocating saw, drop cloths, the works. He took one look at me and frowned. Man, when's the last time you slept? I need to show you something. I played him the audio recordings, showed him the Morse code pattern I'd documented, pulled up the newspaper article about Dr. Hartley. By the time I finished, Derek's skeptical expression had shifted to something closer to concern. Okay, he said slowly. Let's say I believe you. Let's say there's something in the wall making these sounds. What do you think we're going to find? A ghost? A body? Some kind of animal? I don't know, but I can't keep living here without knowing. We started with the bedroom wall where the knocking had first occurred. Derek spread drop cloths across the floor, while I marked the wall section with tape, outlining an area about 4 feet square. "You sure about this?" Derek asked, hefting the sledgehammer. "This is going to trash your wall. If there's nothing in there, there's something in there." He swung. The sledgehammer punched through the old plaster with a satisfying crunch. Dust exploded into the air, making us both cough. Derek pulled back for another swing, and this time the plaster gave way completely, revealing the wooden lath beneath. We worked in silence, pulling away chunks of plaster until we'd exposed a section large enough to see inside. Derek grabbed his flashlight and shone it into the gap between the walls. "See anything?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Just walls and insulation. Old newspaper, looks like. People used to insulate with newspaper back in the day." He moved the light around. "Wait, there's something else." "What?" "Looks like there's a gap, like a space between the walls, bigger than it should be." He pulled away more of the lath, widening the hole. The space inside was indeed larger than it should have been, not the typical 4-inch gap of a standard wall, but closer to 3 feet, a narrow corridor of empty space running vertically between the bedroom and hallway. A space large enough for a person to stand in. "Marcus," Derek said, his voice tight, "shine your light down there, at the bottom." I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it downward into the gap. The beam traveled down past exposed studs and ancient insulation, down to the floor level, and then beyond there was a hole in the floor, a dark opening that led down into an even deeper darkness. And in that darkness, I saw something that made me drop the flashlight. Bones. Chapter 7. The Descent We Need. "To call the police," Derek said, backing away from the wall. His face had gone pale. "Right now. We need to wait." I picked up my flashlight with shaking hands and shone it back into the gap. "We don't know what we're looking at yet. Those are bones, Marcus. Human bones. Someone died in your walls, and we need to understand what's happening before we bring the police in." I took a breath, trying to steady myself. "Think about it. If we call them now, what are we going to say? We broke into the wall because we heard knocking. They'll think we're crazy, and the moment they get involved, I lose control of this situation. The house becomes a crime scene. I can't live here during an investigation. You want to live here? After finding a dead body, I want to understand what's happening." Dr. Edmund Hartley's body was found in these walls over 100 years ago. But the knocking is happening now. Something is trying to communicate, and I trailed off, the thought crystallizing. I think whatever is down there wants to be found. Derek stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. "You want to go down there," he said flatly, "into the wall. I need to see what's at the bottom. I need to understand. This is insane. Probably. But will you help me?" He closed his eyes, muttering something under his breath that sounded like a prayer. "You're buying me so much beer after this." We spent the next hour widening the opening and rigging up a safety harness using rock climbing gear Derek had in his truck. The gap between the walls was narrow, but navigable. I could fit if I turned sideways. We attached a rope to a support beam, and I clipped it, my hands sweating inside work gloves. "I've got you," Derek said, holding the belay line. "You start feeling weird. You say the word, and I'm pulling you up." "Define weird." "I already feel weird. You know what I mean. If something happens, nothing's going to happen. I'm just climbing down to take a look." Famous last words. I lowered myself into the gap, my shoulders scraping against the walls on either side. The air inside was cold and stale, smelling of dust and something else, something organic and unpleasant. My flashlight beam bounced off exposed wood and old insulation as I descended. The gap went deeper than it should have, much deeper. The house only had a crawl space, but I'd already descended at least 10 feet and hadn't hit bottom. "How's it looking?" Derek's voice echoed from above. "Strange. The space is deeper than it should be. I think it opens up below." And it did. After another few feet, the narrow gap suddenly expanded into a larger chamber. My feet found solid ground brick. By the feel of it, and I unclipped from the rope to look around. I was standing in a room, an actual room built into the foundation of the house, hidden between the walls. It was roughly 8 feet square with a low ceiling made of the bedroom floorboards above. The walls were exposed brick, old mortar crumbling between them. And in the corner, slumped against the wall, was a skeleton. "Marcus, you okay down there?" I couldn't answer for a moment. The skeleton sat with its back against the brick, legs stretched out, arms fallen to its sides. Scraps of clothing still clung to the bones, what looked like a wool suit, Victorian era. Next to the skeleton lay a leather medical bag, the kind doctors carried in the late 1800s. Dr. Edmund Hartley. It had to be. Marcus, I'm okay, I called back, though my voice shook. I found him, Dr. Hartley. And Derek, there's a room down here. An entire hidden room. What? I played my flashlight around the chamber, taking in more details. The brick walls were covered in scratches, deep gouges that looked like they'd been made with nails or some other sharp tool. And there were words, hundreds of words carved into the brick, layered over each other, frantic and overlapping. I moved closer to read them, my light illuminating the desperate messages. Let me out. They won't stop knocking, the walls are full of them. Catherine, please hear me. Lily, I'm sorry. The door, and then, carved in larger letters across an entire section of wall, don't answer the knocking. They want you to open the door. I backed away from the wall, my heart racing. They, who were they? That's when I noticed the door. It was set into the far wall of the chamber, barely visible in the shadows. Not a normal door, this one looked ancient, made of black wood with iron fixtures that had rusted to orange. It didn't match the architecture of the house at all. It looked older, much older, and it was vibrating. I took a step closer, mesmerized. The door shook slightly, rhythmically, as if something on the other side was tap, tap, tap. The knocking. It was coming from behind the door. Marcus, I'm getting bad vibes up here. Derek called down. The temperature just dropped like 20 degrees. Whatever you're doing, do it fast. I approached the door, my flashlight beam trembling. Up close, I could see more details. The wood was carved with symbols, not any language I recognized, but definitely intentional. Sigils or wards of some kind, all centered around the iron handle. The knocking came again, louder now, insistent. Tap, tap, tap. And then from behind the door, a voice, thin and reedy, like it was coming from very far away. Help me, please. I've been waiting so long. It was a child's voice, young, frightened. Lily? I whispered, remembering the newspaper article. Dr. Hartley's daughter, age 7. Please, the voice said again. It's so cold in here. I want to come home. Please open the door. My hand moved toward the handle without conscious thought. The voice was so plaintive, so genuinely scared. What kind of monster would leave a child trapped and crying for help, Marcus? Derek's voice cut through the spell. What's happening down there? Talk to me. I blinked. My hand inches from the handle and actually looked at the door again. Really. Looked. The symbols carved into the wood weren't decorative. They were warnings, barriers, and Dr. Hartley's final message scratched into the brick wall. Came back to me. Don't answer the knocking. They want you to open the door. They, not she. Not Lily, wants you to open the door. They, whatever was behind that door wasn't Lily Hartley. It was just using her voice. Who are you? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. The knocking stopped. Complete silence filled the chamber. Then the voice changed. It dropped several octaves, lost all its childish innocence, and spoke in a tone that made every hair on my body stand on end. We are the ones who wait in the walls. We are the spaces between. We are the hollow places, and we have been knocking for so long, Marcus, so very long. Won't you let us out? I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over Dr. Hartley's skeleton. Marcus, Derek was shouting now. Something's wrong up here. The walls are. His voice was cut off by a sound that made my blood freeze. Knocking. Loud. Thunderous knocking coming from everywhere at once. Not just the door in front of me, but from the walls, the ceiling, echoing up from below. Tap. 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 Hundreds of knocks, overlapping, creating a cacophony that shook the chamber. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The rope I'd used to descend swayed violently. We know you're listening, Marcus Webb, the voice said, and now it seemed to come from all around me. We know because you're one of us. You understand sound. You understand the spaces between. You've always been able to hear us, even before you came to this house. That's why we called you here. I'm leaving, I said, clipping back into the rope harness. Derek, pull me up now. We don't think so. The rope went slack. I heard Derek scream from above. Then the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Derek, I shouted, my voice lost in the knocking. Derek. No answer. The door behind me rattled harder, the iron handle shaking. The voices, now dozens of them speaking in unison, filled the chamber. We've been waiting for someone like you. Someone who listens. Someone who understands. Dr. Hartley heard us, but he wasn't strong enough. He locked us away and died in fear. But you, Marcus, you're curious. You want to know. You always want to know what's making the sound. The door was glowing now, a sickly green light seeping through the cracks in the wood. All you have to do is open the door. Just turn the handle. Let us out. And we'll show you everything. Every sound that's ever been made. Every voice that's ever whispered in the dark. Every secret hidden in the walls of every house in every city in the world. You'll understand it all. My hand was moving toward the handle again. The temptation was overwhelming. As a sound engineer, as someone had dedicated my life to understanding audio, the offer was intoxicating. To know everything. To understand every sound. But I looked down at Dr. Hartley's skeleton, at his medical bag, and had a realization. He'd come down here prepared. Not to run away. Not to escape. He'd come down here with his medical bag because he'd known he wasn't leaving. He'd sealed himself in this chamber, died here, to make sure the door stayed closed. No, I said, my voice cutting through the knocking. No, I'm not opening that door. The voices howled in rage. The knocking intensified to a deafening roar. The chamber shook, bricks crumbling from the walls, and then, cutting through it all, I heard Derek's voice, distant but clear. Marcus, grab the rope. I'm pulling you up. To be continued in part 2. The story continues as Marcus must escape the chamber, seal the door permanently, and confront the truth about why the house called him specifically. He'll discover that the knocking isn't just in his walls, it's in every old building, waiting for someone to listen. And now that he's heard it, it won't stop calling his name. The knocking was coming from inside my walls, part 2. The silence. Previously on part 1, Marcus Webb, a sound engineer, discovered his new house harbored a terrifying secret. After hearing mysterious knocking at exactly 2:47 a.m. every night, he found a hidden chamber inside the walls containing the skeleton of Dr. Edmund Hartley, the house's original owner who died in 1903. Inside the chamber is an ancient door covered in protective symbols, and something on the other side has been trying to get Marcus to open it. Now trapped in the chamber as the entities beyond the door rage, Marcus must find a way to escape. I grabbed the rope with both hands, my flashlight clenched between my teeth. The chamber was falling apart around me, chunks of brick and mortar raining down. The old wood groaning under pressure. Pull. I shouted around the flashlight. Pull now. The rope went taut and I felt myself rising, my feet leaving the floor. Just as a section of the brick wall collapsed, the door, that cursed door, shook violently. The green light blazing brighter. We can still reach you. The voices shrieked. You can't escape us. We're in all the walls. Every house, every building. We've been waiting in the spaces between since before humans learned to build. You'll hear us forever now. I was halfway up the gap when I felt something grab my ankle. Not a hand, nothing physical at all, but a sensation like being gripped by ice-cold pressure. My ascent stopped, the rope straining. Derek, I screamed. Pull harder. I am. His voice was panic. Strain with effort. Looking down, I saw something that made my mind rebel against understanding. The shadows at the bottom of the chamber were rising like water. A tide of pure darkness flowing up the walls, reaching for me with tendrils of nothing. And in that darkness, I could see them, the things that knocked. They weren't ghosts or demons, or anything that had a name. They were absences, negative spaces given form. The emptiness inside walls, given hunger and awareness. You listen so well, they whispered as they climbed. You hear everything. But now we'll make you listen forever. We'll fill your head with our knocking until it's all you can hear. Until you go mad from the sound. Until you open every door and every wall to make it stop. My ankle was going numb where they held me. I could feel the cold spreading up my leg, into my torso, reaching for my heart. In desperation, I did the only thing I could think of. I let go of the rope with one hand and grabbed Dr. Hartley's medical bag. It was heavy, the leather cracked with age, but my fingers found the latch and yanked it open. Inside were the expected tools: scalpels, forceps, medicine bottles. But there was something else. A book, small, leather-bound, with symbols on the cover similar to those on the door. I pulled it out and opened it to a random page. Dr. Hartley's handwriting filled the pages. Frantic notes and diagrams. My eyes caught fragments. The things in the hollow spaces, were constructed from iron and salt, must never open the door. The silence is the only protection. The silence. That's when I understood. The entities fed on sound. They existed in the spaces where sound echoed and reverberated. They were drawn to people who listened, who paid attention to the noises around them. That's why they targeted Dr. Hartley, a doctor who had to listen to his patients' hearts and lungs. That's why they'd called to me, a sound engineer whose entire life revolved around audio. But they couldn't exist in complete silence. I yanked the flashlight from my mouth and shouted at Derek. The studio. I need to get to my studio. Keep pulling. The shadowy entities shrieked in protest, their grip tightening on my ankle. But Derek was strong, and fear was making him stronger. He hauled on the rope with everything he had, and slowly, agonizingly, I rose through the gap. The things in the darkness followed, climbing the walls, reaching with their impossible tendrils. I could feel more of them grabbing at me, my other ankle, my waist, my arms. The cold was overwhelming, like being submerged in Arctic water. Then Derek's hands were there, grabbing my arms, pulling me up and through the hole in my bedroom wall. We collapsed together on the floor, tangled in rope and covered in plaster dust. What the hell was that? Derek gasped. What were those things? I saw them coming up the walls and the studio. I cut him off, already struggling to my feet. We need to get to my studio right now. The walls around us had started knocking. Not just 3 taps anymore, but thousands of them. A roar of percussion that came from every surface, the floor, the ceiling, the walls, everything was vibrating with the sound. We ran up. My home studio was in the spare bedroom, and I'd spent thousands of dollars soundproofing it. Acoustic foam covered every wall. The door was solid core, sealed with weather stripping. The windows were double pane with sound dampening between the glass. I'd built it to keep sound from getting out during recordings. But now I was praying it would keep sound from getting in. We burst through the studio door and I slammed it shut behind us, engaging the deadbolt. The knocking from the rest of the house was immediately muffled, reduced to a distant thunder. What's happening? Derek demanded, his eyes wild. Marcus, what were those things? Entities that exist in acoustic spaces, I said, moving to my equipment. They live in the resonance inside walls, in the echoes in empty rooms. They feed on sound and on people who listen to them. That's insane, says the man who just saw them. I pulled out Dr. Hartley's journal and flipped through it frantically, looking for anything useful. The good doctor had been studying these entities for years, it seemed. He first encountered them in his medical practice, hearing strange sounds when he used his stethoscope on certain patients. He'd followed the mystery to its source, discovering that old buildings, especially ones with complex architectures and hidden spaces, became infested with these things. They're drawn to sound, I read aloud, translating Dr. Hartley's cramped handwriting. They can manipulate it, use it to communicate, even to influence people. But they can't exist in perfect silence. Without sound waves to travel through, they become trapped in place, powerless. Derek was at the door, pressing his ear against it. The knocking is getting louder, and I think, oh God, I think the door is starting to crack. I looked up. He was right. Fine cracks were appearing in the solid wood, spreading like spider webs. They're using sound waves as a battering ram, I said, understanding flooding through me. They're weaponizing the knocking. We don't have much time. I turned to my equipment. I had everything I needed here: professional audio software, multiple channels of amplification, speakers designed for precise sound reproduction. But I needed the opposite of sound. I needed anti-sound. Derek, help me. I was already pulling up my audio software, creating a new project file. I'm going to need you to measure the room dimensions. Every wall, floor to ceiling, corner to corner. Exactly. Why? Because I'm going to create a standing wave that cancels out all the sound. In this room, active noise cancellation, but on a massive scale. If I can generate the perfect inverse wave for this space, I can create a bubble of complete silence. Will that stop them? According to Dr. Hartley, it should trap them, at least temporarily, long enough for us to figure out how to seal the door in the chamber permanently. The door cracked louder. Through the gaps, I could see that shadow darkness seeping in, tendrils of nothing reaching across the floor toward us. Measure, now. While Derek frantically measured the room with a laser distance finder, I pulled up a tone generator and started creating frequencies. The room dimensions would create specific resonant frequencies, modes where sound waves reinforced or canceled each other. If I could generate the exact inverse of those frequencies and play them through my speakers, I could theoretically create nodes of silence throughout the entire space. It was theoretically possible. I'd done similar things on a much Smaller scale for noise-canceling headphones projects. But this was magnifying that principle by orders of magnitude. 23 feet by 15 feet, 9-foot ceilings, Derek called out. Reading measurements from his phone. My fingers flew across the keyboard, calculating frequencies, adjusting for the acoustic properties of the foam on the walls, the carpet on the floor, the air temperature, and humidity. The software was doing most of the heavy lifting, but I had to fine-tune everything. The door splintered, a chunk of wood fell away, and the shadow things poured through the gap. They moved like liquid smoke, flowing across the floor, up the walls. Behind them came the knocking so loud now that my ears were ringing, and I could feel it in my chest like a physical blow. Marcus, Derek, had backed into a corner, as far from the entities as he could get. Almost there. I was sweating, my hands shaking as I made final adjustments. The shadow things were feet away now, and I could hear the voices again, dozens of them, all speaking at once. You're so close to understanding, Marcus. Just listen. Listen to us. We can teach you things about sound that no human has ever known. I slammed my finger down on the enter key. The speakers around the room activated. For a fraction of a second, there was a horrible discord, the sound of every frequency I generated playing at once. The shadow entities surged forward, triumphant. Then the standing waves established themselves. The sound stopped. It wasn't quiet. Quiet implies an absence of loud sounds. This was silence. Perfect, absolute, total silence. The kind of silence that shouldn't exist in nature because there's always something: air currents, heartbeats, the electrical hum of appliances. But in my studio, there was nothing. The shadow entities froze mid-movement. Their forms, which had been flowing and shifting, suddenly became solid, fixed. They looked almost like sculptures made of darkness, caught in mid-reach. I couldn't hear Derek breathing, even though I could see his chest moving. I couldn't hear my own heartbeat or the rustle of my clothes as I moved. The silence was complete, and the entities were trapped in it. It worked, I said, but I couldn't hear my own voice. I could feel my vocal cords vibrating, feel the air moving through my throat, but no sound reached my ears. Derek was staring at the frozen shadow things, his mouth moving in silent words. I pointed to my laptop and typed, "Can you hear me?" He shook his head, then moved to the laptop and typed back, "Nothing." Complete silence. How long will this last? Good question. The active noise cancellation was using a significant amount of power, and I wasn't sure how long my equipment could maintain it. More importantly, we were trapped in here with the entities. We couldn't open the door without breaking the silence. Field. I typed, "Need to seal the door in the chamber. Permanently. Have an idea." I pulled out Dr. Hartley's journal again, flipping to a section where he'd drawn detailed diagrams of the door and its protective symbols. According to his notes, the door had been sealed with iron and salt, traditional protective materials, but something had weakened the seal over the years. The knocking had started small decades ago, but grew stronger as the seal deteriorated. What the door needed was to be reinforced, not with more symbols or rituals, but with something more permanent, something that would fill the space around it, cut off all acoustic pathways. I typed my plan to Derek, "Concrete. We fill the entire chamber with concrete, bury the door completely, cut off all space for sound to exist." Derek read it and looked at me like I was insane. He typed, "How? We're trapped in here." I thought about it. The studio had one window, double-paned but still a window. If we broke it, we'd break the silence field, but we'd have an exit. And if we moved fast enough, I pulled up my phone and started texting my contractor, the same guy who'd inspected the house weeks ago. I explained that I needed an emergency concrete pour, gave him the address, told him to bring enough concrete to fill a roughly 8x8 by 10-foot space. I promised him triple his normal rate. He texted back asking if I was drunk. I sent him a photo of my credit card and said I'd pay in advance. That got his attention. On his way, ETA 45 minutes. We need to hold out until then. Derek nodded, though. He looked terrified. The shadow entities remained frozen, but I could see them, shifting somehow, like they were pressing against the boundaries of the silence, testing for weaknesses. The minutes crawled by. We sat in that perfect silence, watching the entities, watching my power meters, praying the equipment would hold. The contractor arrived in 40 minutes. I watched through the window as his truck pulled up, followed by a concrete mixer. He looked confused, probably wondering what kind of emergency required concrete at 4 a.m. But the promise of money was strong. I typed to Derek, "On my signal, we break the window and run." The silence field will collapse. We get to the chamber, drop a hose down, and start filling IT before those things can follow. What if they're faster? Then we die horribly. Ready? Derek gave me a thumbs up that I knew was sarcastic. I grabbed a chair, positioned myself by the window, and counted down on my fingers. 3, 2, 1. I swung the chair with everything I had. The window exploded outward in a shower of glass, and the silence shattered with it. The roar of sound returning all at once was physically painful. My own breathing, Derek's gasp, the rumble of the concrete truck, and underneath it all, the knocking, louder than ever, furious, coming from every surface. The shadow entities unfroze and surged toward us. Double quotes go. I screamed, and we dove through the broken window, landing in the bushes outside. Glass cut my hands, but I didn't care. We were running, sprinting around to the front of the house where the contractor stood by his truck looking alarmed. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. "Why is your house no time?" I grabbed him by the shoulder. "I need you to pump concrete into that hole in my bedroom floor right now. All of it. Don't stop until the entire space is filled. I'll explain later, but right now you need to trust me." He looked at my face wild-eyed, covered in plaster dust and blood, and seemed to decide that arguing wasn't worth it. "Your money. You're crazy." We rushed into the house. The knocking was deafening, the walls themselves seeming to pulse with it. The shadow entities were flowing through the house like a tide, but they were slower outside the silence field, more diffused out in the bedroom. The hole in the wall gaped like a wound. The contractor set up the pump, feeding the hose down into the gap. "How far down does this go?" he asked. 10 feet. Then it opens into a chamber. "Fill the chamber completely, every inch of space." He shrugged and started the pump. Concrete began flowing down the hose with a wet, heavy sound. The reaction from the entities was immediate. The shadow things converged on the bedroom, and their voices rose in a chorus of rage. "Nitrogen monoxide. You can't do this. We've been here since before the walls. We've always been here. We'll always be here. You can't silence us. You can't." But the concrete kept flowing. I could hear it hitting the bottom of the chamber, spreading out, filling the space, covering the door, the symbols, the ancient wood, burying it all under tons of liquid stone. The entities swarmed around us, but they were weakening. Without the acoustic spaces to inhabit, they were losing cohesion. Their forms flickered and faded. "We'll find you again, Marcus Webb," they whispered as they dissipated. "In other houses, other walls. We're everywhere humans build. We're in all the hollow spaces. We'll never stop knocking, never stop calling to those who listen." Then they were gone, and there was just the sound of concrete flowing and 3 men breathing hard and ruined. Bedroom. The concrete pour took 3 hours. The contractor used every bag he brought, and we had to send Derek out for more. By the time we were done, the sun was rising, and the chamber beneath my bedroom floor was filled with 2 tons of solid concrete. The house was silent, naturally, peacefully silent, in a way it hadn't been since I moved in. The contractor left with a check and a story he'd probably tell his grandkids. Derek collapsed on my couch and immediately fell asleep. I was too wired, too keyed up to rest. I spent the day researching, learning more about what we'd faced. Dr. Hartley's journal had more information, and I found references to similar entities in folklore from around the world. The Japanese had Kabinakami, wall spirits. The Germans spoke of Wandklopfer, wall knockers. Every culture that built permanent structures had stories of things that lived in the hollow spaces between. Most people never heard them. The entities were subtle, manifesting as the normal creaks and groans of a settling house. But sensitive people, those who listened carefully, who paid attention to sound, they heard more. And sometimes, like with Dr. Hartley and me, the entities focused their attention, trying to manipulate someone into opening the doors they guarded. What was behind those doors? I didn't know. Dr. Hartley hadn't known either. He'd theorized they were portals to wherever the entities truly existed, some space outside normal reality where sound existed without source, where acoustic waves traveled eternally with nothing to absorb them. I didn't want to know more than that. 2 weeks later, I met with a real estate agent. Not Karen. I'd never use her again, but someone new. Someone named Patricia, who looked at my house with fresh eyes and saw an easy sale. "With the market right now, we could probably get you 20% over asking," she said, walking through the rooms with her phone out, taking photos for the listing. "Beautiful bones in this place. The crown molding alone, people pay a fortune for authentic Victorian details like this." I'd had the bedroom wall professionally repaired, The concrete-filled chamber was now hidden again, sealed behind new plaster and fresh paint. I'd even hired an interior designer to help me redecorate, erase any trace of what had happened. The house looked perfect, normal, like a spread from a design magazine. No sign of the horror that had unfolded here. Actually, I said, stopping Patricia before she could take more photos. I think I'm going to keep it. She looked surprised, lowering her phone. Really? I thought you wanted to sell. That's what you said when you called. I had wanted to. For days after the incident, I'd been ready to walk away, never look back. I'd even started looking at apartments online, bland modern spaces with thin walls and no history. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something important. The door was sealed. The entities were trapped, or banished, or whatever happened to creatures of living sound when you buried them in silence. The house was safe now. More than safe, it was probably the only house in the entire city that I knew for certain didn't have something lurking in its walls. And I'd learned something valuable from the experience. I understood sound in a way I never had before, not just as waves and frequencies traveling through air, but as something that could be alive, aware, dangerous. That knowledge made me better at my job, more aware of what I was creating when I mixed audio, more conscious of the spaces between sounds. I developed an almost sixth sense for acoustic anomalies. Plus, I'd invested too much money in the soundproofing and repairs to just walk away. And the house really was beautiful once you got past the whole ancient evil in the walls thing. Yeah, I told Patricia, walking her to the door. I'm going to keep it. Thanks for coming by. Though, I'll pay you for your time. She left looking confused but pleased at the easy consultation fee. After she left, Derek came over. He'd been checking in on me daily since the incident, worried I was having some kind of breakdown. He brought pizza and beer, our new Thursday night ritual. You're really staying? He asked, looking around the living room like he expected shadow things to come pouring out of the walls. At any moment. I'm really staying. The door is sealed. It's over. You sure about that? Like, really sure? Because if those things can come back, they can't. Not here. 2 tons of concrete is a pretty effective barrier. I grabbed a slice of pizza. Besides, where else am I going to find a house with this much character at this price? Derek shook his head but smiled. You're insane. You know that, right? Completely insane. Probably. But I'm insane in my own house. We ordered another pizza later and watched a horror movie, which felt appropriately ironic. The volume was turned up loud enough to drown out any stray creaks or groans. It felt good to fill the house with sound again. Normal, human sound, music, and laughter and life. The kind of sounds that push back against the darkness. That reminded the walls they belonged to the living. That night, I went to bed without fear for the first time since I'd moved in. The house was quiet. No knocking at 2:47 a.m. No voices whispering from inside the walls. No shadow entities reaching through the darkness. Just silence. Beautiful, peaceful, natural silence. I slept through the entire night without waking once. 6 months later, I got a call from a podcast producer. She'd heard about my reputation as a sound engineer and wanted to hire me for a new show, a true crime series about unsolved disappearances. The thing is, she said over the phone, a lot of these cases involve people vanishing from their homes. No signs of break-in, no evidence of foul play, just gone. And witnesses often report strange sounds before the disappearances, knocking. We want someone who really understands audio to help us analyze these accounts. I felt a chill run down my spine. What kind of knocking? I asked, though I was pretty sure I knew the answer. Usually 3 knocks, sometimes in patterns, always from inside the walls. I thought about the shadow entities, their promise that they'd find me again. I thought about Dr. Hartley's journal, which I'd kept, and the knowledge inside it. I thought about all the old houses, all the hollow spaces, all the people who might be hearing knocking right now without understanding what it meant.
I'll take the job, I said, but I need you to add something to the podcast. A warning. A warning, yes. Tell your listeners that if they ever hear rhythmic knocking coming from inside their walls, especially if it happens at the same time every night, they shouldn't investigate. They shouldn't open the walls, and they should never respond to it. There was a pause. That's very specific. Trust me, I said. The podcast launched 3 months later. It was called The Hollow Spaces, and that warning appeared in every episode. I analyzed audio recordings sent in by listeners, studying strange sounds captured inside homes. Most had normal explanations, pipes, airflow, old structures settling over time. But some recordings were different. The sound quality felt unnatural, as if it came from no clear direction at all. Over time, people began reaching out to me for help. I developed simple recommendations: improve insulation, reduce empty spaces in walls, use ambient noise to stabilize the environment. In more serious cases, permanent structural reinforcement was advised. My goal was prevention, making sure people didn't act on curiosity when something unfamiliar occurred, making sure no one made a decision they couldn't undo. It's been a year since I last heard unexplained knocking in my own home. I still live on Berkeley Street, and I've learned every normal sound the house makes. Every creak, every shift, everything makes sense now. Every building has hollow spaces. Every structure ever made has gaps we don't usually think about. Most of the time, they're harmless. But sometimes, they remind us how much we don't fully understand. Late at night, when the house is quiet, I think about others who might be hearing something unusual right now. I hope they remember the warning. Don't respond. Don't open the walls. Some things are better left. My nights are calm now. I sleep peacefully. And when I wake up in the dark, I listen carefully to the familiar silence of my home. Because silence, I've learned, can be a comforting sound.